Welcome to Cognis Group Future in Focus Reports. My name is Jess Garrettson, and I'm CEO at Cognis. Today's report is brought to you by Bill's blog at TechCast. Please follow Bill at billhalal.com. Today we discuss trends in capitalism. The financial crisis of 2000 and 2008 and the 2020 pandemic raised serious doubts about the failings of capitalism. These economic collapses, climate change, gross inequality, and other threats making up the global mega-crisis have shattered confidence in what Francis Fukuyama proclaimed as the end of history, the fall of communism, and the triumph of capitalism and democracy. A variety of voices think this could become the next collapse of capitalism, roughly like the collapse of communism, and caused by the same inability to adapt to a changing world. Nobel economist Joseph Stiglitz wrote, "The 2008 financial collapse may be to markets what the Berlin Wall was to communism. Communism could not meet the complex demands of the information revolution, and now capitalism seems to be failing to adapt to the global mega-crisis." In response, corporations are making the transition to a quasi-democratic form of business that focuses on forming collaborative relationships and partnerships with employees, customers, businesses, and the public, as well as shareholders. The Business Roundtable announcement that firms should serve all stakeholders is truly historic. The New York Times called it a watershed moment that raises questions about the very nature of capitalism. If done well, this broader form of business could go beyond social responsibility for doing good to become a competitive advantage. To put shifts in capitalism in perspective, let's consider three models: profit-centered, social responsibility, and corporate community. The profit-centered model is traditional, while corporate responsibility, the CSR, has tried to shift the focus to stakeholders over the past decades, but without much success. The problem is that CSR is usually considered philanthropy and often ignores the needs for profitability, making it a mere opposite of the profit model. In contrast, the corporate community or collaborative enterprise model goes beyond CSR to form a more productive system that benefits all interests. The key lies in making stakeholders working partners rather than recipients of benefits. The fact is that the social interests in any business, workers, customers, partners, and the public, are roughly similar to the role of investors. All these groups invest resources, incur costs, and gain benefits, much like shareholders. Any enterprise is basically a socio-economic system composed of key stakeholders that perform crucial functions. Focusing on only one function distorts the performance of the entire system. It makes as much sense to think of capital as the only goal as it would be to say that the brain, the heart, or the lungs are the most important part of the human body. From a more realistic systems perspective, the need is to integrate all of these resources into a workable whole. This is precisely what any good executive must accomplish to build a viable enterprise. Here's how Bonneville Power harnessed the knowledge of its stakeholders. We used to treat outsiders, labor unions, the public, regulators, as a nuisance. After working with them, our adversaries helped us find creative solutions to intractable problems. Public involvement is a must for today's managers. Conflict is unavoidable. The only choice is whether to dodge it or harness it. A democratic form of enterprise would support cooperation throughout the social order, relieve government of burdensome oversight responsibility, and reduce the risk of market volatility. Because business firms would be controlled by their stakeholders, they would internalize social impacts, reduce government regulations and bureaucracy. This would also reduce the risk of stock market drops, labor conflict, cutthroat competition, swings in consumer loyalty, unexpected regulatory change, and other disruptive factors. Profit is an easily measured traditional goal, so displacing it would meet resistance from many, primarily investors in Wall Street. A quasi-democratic organization can be messy, and it requires political skills that many business leaders lack. The transition to stakeholder collaboration will be difficult, therefore it may take years, and there will always be firms that remain profit-centered. But the coming of collaborative enterprise is well underway even now, and it will transform economic systems. Collaborate with stakeholders to better serve collective interests. This powerful and universal statement can be applied to all institutions. For business, it means serving social interests as well as economic goals. In government, it would carry democracy to the grassroots and better serve towns, cities, and nations. It could also resolve the present conflict in healthcare between profit and multi-million-dollar executive pay versus the welfare of patients and communities. Religious organizations, such as the Catholic Church, would then temper the hierarchical power of the priesthood with the influence of their members. Here are some key trends driving the new capitalism. Progressive business is going democratic. A robust leading edge of progressive business firms and practices have long thrived around the world. Johnson & Johnson, Nucor Steel, IKEA, the Mondragon in Spain, labor participation in Germany, self-management in France, and Japanese corporations have practiced various forms of collaborative management for years. Studies by consulting firm McKinsey conclude shares of companies that connect effectively with all stakeholders outperform competitors by 2% per year on average. Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, acknowledged, shareholder value is a result, not a strategy. Your main constituencies are your employees and your customers. Another trend is institutional investors. Lawrence D. Fink, founder and CEO of BlackRock, which holds $6 trillion in investments, told 1,000 of the world's largest corporations, society is demanding that companies serve a social purpose. Every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. While JANA Partners and Cal STRS, the California Retirement System, issued a similar declaration. We believe the long-term health of society, our economy, and the company itself are inextricably linked. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, a senior associate dean at the Yale School of Management, said, "It is huge for an institutional investor to take this position across its portfolio." He said he's seen nothing like it. United Nations. The UN Global Compact is an association of businesses committed to universally accepted principles in human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. The association includes over 13,000 organizations from more than 145 countries currently. Another trend is the co-op movement. The International Cooperative Alliance represents the global cooperative movement, with 284 organizations across 95 countries. B Corporations. This group of firms focuses on solving social and environmental problems. Unlike traditional businesses, they meet comprehensive and transparent standards of social and environmental performance, institutionalize stakeholder interests, and build a collective voice through a unifying brand. Amy Prosenjak, a B Corporation owner, said everybody has to win. Benefit corporations. The benefit corporation goes beyond the B Corp to make its status legal. California and another 26 American states recently enacted laws requiring benefit corporations to provide a public benefit, to be governed to serve all stakeholders, assess social and economic performance annually, and to operate transparently. Business for social responsibility. This global network of 250 plus companies, thought leaders, and stakeholders share best practices. Another trend is business culture. These concepts are now practiced among progressive companies and taught at business schools. Recent surveys show that only 5% of CEOs now say they are mainly focused on profit and not distracted by social goals. Other surveys show that more than 80% favor stakeholder collaboration. Fortune 500. Over 80% of Fortune 500 companies now publish corporate social responsibility reports, covering issues like governance, community, and partnerships. The editor of Fortune said, "An ever-growing group of business leaders are building efforts to address social problems. Companies are moving beyond fuzzy notions like sustainability and corporate citizenship to making meaningful social impacts central to how they compete." Business schools. One of the most popular courses at the Harvard Business School is Reimagining Capitalism. Enrollment increased from 28 students when the course started 7 years ago, and now have 300 plus students each semester. And finally, public attitudes. A study by Deloitte finds that 60 to 80% of millennials want to work for companies with strong social purpose. A poll found that 51% of Americans aged 18 to 29 do not support capitalism, and only 42% think it's a good economic system. Now here are some obstacles that are opposing new capitalism. They're enormous, of course, and change is hard, so bold leaders are needed to take on this difficult challenge. The first is tradition. Some countries have cultures that are committed to traditional forms of capitalism, focused on profit and the right of the shareholders, and they're likely to resist the difficult changes that are involved. Investor rights. Shareholders legally own a corporation, which tends to stress the central role of profit. In fact, shareholders can sue if not satisfied that management is doing everything within reason to maximize their profit. However, some corporations are learning to fight back and are into suing their shareholders. The power of Wall Street. The possibility of takeover has traditionally forced firms to focus on short-term gains to avoid losing capital as their stock drops under the threat of being absorbed by another company. The collaborative enterprises offers the possibility of resolving this problem by having stock held by stakeholders who are interested in the long term. Additionally, democracy is messy. Collaboration is more time-consuming and difficult than autocratic leadership, and it may fail. The intention may be good and some firms may thrive, but there's serious risk of wasted time, endless conflict, and the rising cost of the democratic processes. A new generation of leaders. Few present business leaders seem able to make this change. A new generation of executives less wedded to tradition may be required to spearhead the transition. And finally, this requires political skill. Forming working relationships is inherently a political act, so managers must adapt by developing skills. This requires a more challenging form of political leadership and depends on stakeholders being receptive to partnering. Thank you for listening today. For more information on this report or other custom research, please contact us at info@cognisgroup.com or more directly in the U.S. at 1-303-709-3157 and outside the states at 44-1904-435-190. Thank you again.